if you really have, love for me and you really are concerned about me, I do want you to know that, like, this isn't like a cry for help or an issue of any sort. This is just me having no hair.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nick here with another episode of Break It Down. Now, today, as you can see, we have an interesting clip that's going viral on social media with Doja Cat's new look. Now, she shaved off her head as well as her eyebrows. Now, a lot of her fans are up in arms and worried. Is she going through something psychologically? She's having a mental breakdown. But she took to the internet to talk about how she isn't, and she just wanted to cut her hair. Now, as always on this channel, we're going to look at things through science and psychology. This is not a clinical disorder diagnosis, nor is it me trying to make light of her situation. It's just me going over some things and making sense of it through the science and psychology. So with that being said, let's break it down.
So it's just funny to me that people are in any way like shocked or taken aback by me being bald and having no eyebrows. Maybe to be fair, I've always kind of seemed like a thought. Like, I've always had my ass out and been like sexy, and like I rap about sex and stuff like that. So some people don't see this as very sexual, but to me it is. I feel like I feel sexy, for sure. But I understand that. I can see that angle of it, but I don't care, and I'm still the same me. I guess the bigger difference now in my life is that I'm not performing and working as much, so I have a little bit more freedom, and I think that kind of makes me overexert in a way. Like, I'm like kind of crazy on the internet, more so now, just because I have that time. And I get bored. I get bored now. I used to not really get bored. So yeah.
Now, as I mentioned, a lot of her fans were up in arms worried about her because, when you're at a celebrity status, everything that you do is under a microscope. So they were thinking, is she going through something troubling? Is she going through depression, stress, anxiety? And you could assume all people, let alone celebrities, are going through some form of anxiety or maybe depression. And in recent news, she got publicly kind of humiliated when she tried to holler at Stranger Things star and basically got shot down and was put on blast. Not something easy to deal with. But the thing is, she said that this has nothing to do with her mental health, has nothing to do with any kind of exposure and embarrassment. It's just something she wanted to do. Now, a lot of people are likening this to Britney Spears back in the early 2000s when she cut her hair, and you would see later on she would go under a conservatorship, and she was dealing with mental illness. But this is a little bit different. Now, when I saw this, the first thing that I thought about was trichotillomania. Now, I automatically said, does Doja Cat have trichotillomania? And you're probably thinking, what is trichotillomania? Well, basically, she doesn't. The criteria for it, she doesn't really meet it. So what trichotillomania is, the pulling out of one's hair. It's similar to an OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder in the regards that you obsess over the thoughts or the intrusive thoughts and worries, and to relieve them, you pull out your hair in patches. Now, you typically don't want the public to know. You will try to hide the patches so they don't know. You won't do it in front of anyone in the open. So that's why immediately I didn't think she had trichotillomania, because she didn't pull out her hair. She completely cut it off. Now, in her response video, she would talk about how she was tired of never showing off her hair. She always had to wear wigs, have braids and then under a cap, and then she would have to work out or practice and rehearse, and it just was annoying not to ever show off her real hair. So this makes light of that she did have some kind of intrusive thoughts about it, but it's more so about her hair in general. Typically with trichotillomania, it's not about the hair. The hair is relief. When you talk about disorders such as OCD, for example, it's not necessarily the act that you're doing is what you care about. It's the relief of the thought. Because if the thoughts always worry, how do you relieve it? By knocking on the table 3 times, or in this case with trichotillomania, pulling out your hair. This makes you feel relieved. It's like an itch that you got to get rid of. And once you pull the hair out, it goes away. But guess what? The thoughts are going to keep coming. Now, that's another reason why you couldn't put her on this disorder, because it has to invade your life, has to be significant enough that it's not attributed to other disorders, and it has to make some kind of hindrance. Because when we talk about mental illness, we got to talk about severity. We have to talk about frequency and intensity. These all make a difference because everyone has intrusive thoughts and worries. Everyone gets depressed, everyone gets anxious. But how deep does it go? Does it stop you from going outside? Does it stop you from interacting with friends and family members? This is when it can get to the borderline of, is it presenting as a clinical diagnosis? And in this case with Doja Cat, she doesn't mean any of these. But going back to just a mental breakdown then, if it's not trichotillomania, we can rule that out completely. Why is she cutting her hair off, including her eyebrows? That's not usual behavior. When we talk about mental health issues, it's typically when you're doing deviant behavior of the norm. Obviously, people can be out the box. She's a creative, she's an artist, but why would she cut off her hair and eyebrows? She mentioned also in her video that she's seen as a sex symbol. She's seen as someone who is an image of beauty. She's held to societal standards. And now she cut it all off. She can't be held to that anymore. And that's quite interesting because some clinical psychologists have said when people have mental breakdowns, they want to feel control. And when you cut off your hair, that gives you complete control because that's something entirely decided by you. In this case, since she was seen as a sex symbol, she's literally taking back her power or what people see her as. And that's kind of what she said. So this kind of makes sense. So once again, I'm not inside her thoughts, but if you were to say she had a mental breakdown, that kind of leads to that theory because she said clearly that she was sick of not being able to wear her hair. She was sick of people putting her in these categories and these boxes. But when she cut it, she felt liberated. She felt free. And there's something to consider there. Now, something that really stood out to me, she said that she's rich. So she's not worrying about mental health issues or depression. And that's interesting she brought that up because I always say money does help because a lot of times with depression, especially at lower socioeconomic statuses, it plays a factor on how someone's mental well-being can be affected. If you're in poverty and you don't know when your next meal is coming or when you're going to eat, it's easy to fall victim to being depressed. But for the most part, if you know these meals are coming, you're living in a pretty accommodated life, those type of stresses aren't an issue. It comes to more existential things such as what's going on in your work life, your love life, things of that nature. And these are things that would affect her since she's not financially strained, at least from what I know. So you have more time to worry about stressors or worries that aren't necessarily social economical and more material or even personal, which is nothing wrong with that. But it just shows you, is this something she's disregarding? Because while she is rich, it doesn't mean she's not going through anything. Or she's completely fine. She's wanted to do this because she said it's something she's been thinking about. And that's when it goes to compulsory thoughts, because she did mention she thought about it a lot, even since a little girl, about her hair. But I don't think it's because of any psychological issues. I think it's more so that her whole life she's been put in different hairstyles, and it's something in the Black community and the Black culture that's quite common. So I personally don't think she's going through a severe mental breakdown. She might have had a moment. She may even be doing it as publicity. Who knows? I really don't. Like I said, my job on this channel isn't to be the judge and jury. It's just to bring to light different things to take into consideration. Like going back to the clinical psychologists who say that having control, this is something to think about. So that's my thoughts on the matter. It's a pretty interesting scenario, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, and maybe you learn something too about trichotillomania or other just disorders in general, how they're assessed. It's always about frequency, intensity, duration. And these are going to play a factor on clinical psychology on how to make sense of this. I used to be in the clinical psychology field, but I transferred to more applied psychology, and maybe I'll make a video what's the difference between the two of those. But basically what I do is I take the literature, I take the research and make it make sense in performances, whether it be with athlete, military. So that's what my business, Mind, Body, One does. But I do this channel, obviously you guys are watching, so you know that I bring that to the mainstream, trying to break down these videos. But with that being said, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for letting me break it down and get your mind right.